Hey guys, welcome back to Spank Ranch Garage. Tonight I'm building a BMW M54. It's a 2.8 liter. Came across a couple things I'd like to share with you, just kind of how these top ends are oiled and a couple tricks for identifying camshafts. Some of the more experienced BMW engine builders out there probably already know this stuff, but for a beginner, this is probably good to know. So check this out. All right, so one thing, camshaft identification. If you build these motors like I do, you've literally got a mountain of parts laying in the corner of the shop, and when it's time to build one, you got to tear all these pieces out and figure out what you need. Well, I want to use an M54 B30 camshaft on the intake side. I think it's got 9.7 millimeters of lift, where the standard M54 cam only has 9 millimeters of lift. So, you know, I got these three camshafts here, and I'm like, what goes to what is what? You know, I don't remember anymore. So, easiest way to determine this. Just take your caliper, set it to metric, hop onto the base circle of the cam. So you'll notice there's quite a bit of rotation here where it hardly changes. So you see this has a base circle of like 37.9, 96, 95, whatever, right? So come across to your base circle, square it up as best you can, and then zero your caliper. That's gonna basically zero out your base circle, and then you just come over the top of the lobe, and if you see 9.7 or close to it, that is a B30 camshaft. I'll show you what it looks like on a non-B30 camshaft. This will work. This is an exhaust cam, so these are all the same, but this just has 9 millimeters of lift. So same thing, I zero out the caliper, come over here to my base circle. Right, that's about a 38 millimeter base circle as well. Zero it out, come across to the top of the lobe here, and you see she tops out at 8.9-ish. Probably because I was sloppy on zeroing the base circle, but that ain't no 9.7, so you know this is not a B30 intake cam. So that's the only way to really know the camshaft. People like to use casting numbers to identify BMW camshafts. That's not a reliable way, right? These are all casts from the same casting. They just grind it different if it's going to be a B30, an M3, an S52, whatever you're doing. So this number here, when you Google this, there's a thread on Beamer Forums saying that this is a standard M54 B25 camshaft. It is indeed a B30 camshaft, and the lobes prove that. So the only way to really know is to measure it. Easiest way, zero out on your base circle, turn it 90 degrees, boom, you've got your lift, and there's no more guesswork. All right, so cam trays, another very important part of these engines. First thing to know, take a look at the front corner. This has an E on it, which actually means intake, right? It does not mean exhaust. On the exhaust side, you've got an A on it. It's Ausfahrt, exit, exhaust. In German, the E would probably be entrance or something. I don't know exactly what it stands for. So anyway, it's very obvious what side of the engine is the intake and exhaust. Now, a lot of people ask, oh my God, what directions do the caps go on? Well, the caps are actually self-explanatory once you see how they lay out. So the caps are labeled E1 through E7, A1 through A7, and the first cap is the most important because it's got a shoulder on it that takes the thrust out of the camshaft. So camshaft fits in the engine this way, this cap goes on like that, and that actually sets the end play for the cam in this direction. So based on process of elimination, once you put the first cap on correctly, you now know that the E faces this way. And really the question becomes, so this one is an E2 down here, it'll fit both ways. Does it go this way or does it go this way? Both will work, but only one way is correct. So once you set that first cam cap, that sets your direction for the remainder of the cam caps. So another point about cam trays, these are actually very well designed castings from BMW. This is a really expensive cast, and it's got a lot of post machining on it. So the first thing you like to look at is, where does the oil for the camshaft come from? Well, the oil comes from these holes in each journal here. And that's what oils these journals on the camshaft. But where does that oil come from? So you flip this upside down, and you see here that you've got this little port here that pushes into one of the actual hold down studs, and this is on every single one. What's also important to note is that inside each lifter bore, you can see you have an oil hole here, and you flip it around, you've got an oil hole here. So these lifters are oiled from this common hole here, as well as the camshaft. So we lube the camshaft with this, we lubricate and pump up the lifters with this, but it all comes through here. Now what that looks like on the cylinder head side is you have just this, right? When you bolt this down, you've got this oil passage here. You can see there's kind of a bulge along the cylinder head there. That is the main oil galley through the head here. You can see there's a plug in the back from when BMW drilled it. And then same thing on the exhaust side, same exact thing. And you can see there's a plug down here, and that's how they drilled that one. There's actually a freeze plug here. There's always evidence of how they got their drill in there to do that, because nobody's actually casting oil galleys typically. And then they came through here and they drilled their holes in. So what does this mean for us when you're building an engine, especially when you're like me and this thing's been torn apart for 2 or 3 years and parts everywhere? You need to be sure that you're cleaning every single one of these oil passages. If you don't, first time you fire this engine up, you're gonna push all that crap up there into the cam trays, and the bore to lifter clearance is very tight and it's very susceptible to contamination. It does a hell of a lot of damage when contamination happens. So you don't want that to happen. It's actually, you know, it's fairly challenging to find a good set of cam trays that don't have a lot of damage in here. Now moving on to the lifters, you can see here that this lifter has this hole in it, which conveniently rides about the same height as the hole that's inside the lifter bore here. And all that does is one, this ring distributes oil around the lifter. So this lifter is floating in a film of oil in here. It shouldn't actually be touching the cam tray. And two, this hole leads to the inside of this lifter and physically pumps up this plunger to take care of your valve lash. So in a perfect world, that's how all that works. Another thing to keep in mind is that this lifter is spinning the entire time. So this lifter is not just moving up and down, this thing is spinning like crazy in here. And that's because these camshafts are not actually ground flat. So you won't be able to see it with your eyes, but each of these cam lobes is actually taller on one side than the other. And that's intentional, and that is to rotate your lifter a little bit with each lift. So this thing will go, you know, turns a little, turns a little, turns a little. And that's how you get a nice wear profile across the top of these things. This is not unique to BMW. This is any flat tappet motor will have this. Some have worse wear patterns than others. I don't like the looks of this pattern, but this lifter, it was good for 240,000 miles. It'll last me another 100,000 hopefully. But that's how that works. If that didn't turn, you would eventually mushroom and wear a hole through the top of this lifter. So having it turn like that keeps everything happy, keeps fresh oil on everything. Similar to the cam trays, the front timing chain tensioner also is oil controlled, right? So this is a little hydraulic piston in here, and it gets its oil through this little port in the bottom, which is right here. This is tied into the other ports that actually lubricate the cam trays and the lifters. Do not forget to clean this one out. But yeah, just like the rest of it, there's your oil pickup hole there. That all lines up when it's together. Essentially, you're face sealing on this washer here. You're creating a cavity of high pressure oil between the threads and this face seal, and that actually extends this tensioner to hold the chain together. The spring is only here for cranking and low oil pressure situations, but really this could run without the spring in a perfect world. Never try that, never do that, because you will have times when you don't have oil pressure. But overall, these things are extremely reliable as well, as long as they're getting the oil they need. And then taking a look at an extra cylinder head here, there is actually only one oil feed from the block to the cylinder head, and that is right here. And you've got this valve in here. And I believe the intention of this is an anti-drain back valve. But as you get pressurized oil from your oil pump up into the block, through your oil filter, and then heading towards the cylinder head, this is where all that comes in at, and then it is internally ported within the cylinder head to the two cam trays and the tensioner up front there. Another couple things about lifters, right? These are obviously hydraulic lifters, hydraulic lash adjustment. Now you'll notice some of these, and it's kind of rare. I'd say more often than not, the lifters are pretty seized up. Now you can see that this one moves, right? See how that compresses? and it's actually pumping some oil out the side when I'm doing that, that's a really healthy lifter. But typically what I find with the cars of this age, these things are just flattened and done, right? There's zero, you can't get these to move at all. And that is okay. That's not a reason to get rid of these lifters. When you fire one of these engines up on a cold morning, sometimes you'll hear a quick rattle. And I would assume that these lifters are not pumped up yet. And what I think probably goes on here is there's a little bit of stiction in this lifter and the spring is stuck compressed. So in natural state, this lifter doesn't come to full extension. It's basically bottomed out right now. Where for whatever reason, this lifter is still, you know, healthy and doing its spring thing. And on a cold morning, yeah, maybe this one doesn't make as much noise as this one, but in my experience, these cold engines, I mean, they make oil pressure in seconds. So probably 5 seconds, everything's pumped up and sounding good again. And that's where that valve I showed you in the bottom of the head, I believe is an anti-drain back valve. If that's holding, you'll keep that oil pressure above that valve all the way up to the cam, through the cam tray, into the lifter bore. So there won't be pressure there, but there will be oil. So as soon as that oil pump starts turning, you're basically forcing that lifter back open again, and it's gonna ride the top of the valve the way it's intended. So something to consider when installing these cam trays, right? Nothing's holding all these lifters in. You dump this thing over, they all fall out, right? So when you go to put these on the cylinder head, it's like you're trying to hold everything, yada, 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 bloop, they all fall out. Well, you could 3D print a tool to hold these together, to hold the lifters in. You can buy a tool, or what I've used in the past, I just take a piece of welding wire with 12 magnets on it, run them along here to hold everything together. That's sweet if you're doing it in the car. If you're just building an engine on an engine stand, just flip this baby over and let gravity do the work. So I just tilt this thing over like this, right? Now that intake side is going upwards. Take the tray, slide her up on there, and then we flip the engine back over. Quick and dirty. It's kind of corny, but it saves a lot of time screwing around. And now all your lifters are in place, sitting on top of the valves where they belong. All right, guys, and that's all I got for this one. Just a quick little knowledge dump on the BMW M54. This also obviously applies to the aluminum M52 TU as well. And it's actually almost identical to the M50s. Probably most BMW engines are oiled this way. It's a proven design, it works great. I find that it's important to understand how these engines work so I can know how I need to clean them, how I assemble them, what I can get away with and what I can't. So hope you found a little bit of this helpful. Just a little bit of knowledge I wanted to share as I was putting this motor together. I figured it'd be decent to make a little video about it. Hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. My heater is very loud and it's jingling away in the background, but it's getting to that time of year. Anyway, thanks for watching Spank Ranch Garage. Let me know if you got any questions, anything else you'd like to see a video on relating to these engines. Post it in the comments. I'll see you next time.